So I'm excited to have Josh with me here today. Josh is a new person in my life. At my work, he joined our company not too long ago, and he's someone immediately I gravitated towards. He's someone that speaks with his heart.
Yeah.
He speaks with a lot of care and with a lot of wisdom embedded in the things that he communicates with the rest of our company. So I'm really excited to have him here with us today.
Thanks for having me, by the way.
Yeah, of course. and this is going to be really, really informal, right?
Cool.
My intention of this podcast really is just to inquire what it means to be a modern man, to be a man in modern times. And so I seek out people who I believe is really grounded and who know who they are, and then just wanted to have a quick conversation.
Cool.
Right?
Sounds great.
So I guess the opening question that we can start off with would be, what are the pivotal moments in your life that formulated who you are as a man, as a person?
Interesting. You mean starting from kind of youth into transitioning from youth to a man?
wherever you like to start.
I think probably an interesting tale to tell is when I was playing baseball my senior year of high school, and I was pretty good, and I was thinking about potentially playing in college and talking to different colleges about where to play, and thinking, although I always knew I wanted to go to UC Santa Barbara because it's where my grandparents lived.
You went to UCSB?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And so, I was up in Santa Rosa, and I was playing shortstop on the varsity team at a Catholic school called Cardinal Newman. And we went to a tournament in Arizona, and on that tournament, we were left alone. A bunch of us kids were left alone in the hotel, and we ended up breaking into the wet bar inside one of the hotel rooms. One of the kids picked the lock, and then a bunch of us that were all in the room together drank either beer or alcohol. I think we drained the vodka or whatever was clear, and then tried to put water back into it, or something silly that high school kids would do. And I actually kind of knew I was doing something wrong. I knew it was against the rules, but I sort of intrinsically knew that trouble was a brewing, But at the same time, I was certainly peer influenced, and I wanted to be a part of this crew. So I think I had one sip of beer, and that was I'm here, this is fine, but I don't really want to partake in this too much. And this school figured out, and they sat us down, and at first they didn't know who had done it. So the coach basically after this tournament was over, brought everybody into his school classroom that was on the baseball team, put a pen or a pencil and paper down in front of us and said, I want to know everybody's involvement in the incident with alcohol at the hotel, and we're not leaving this room until everybody has written down how they participated. First, everybody was looking at one another, what do we say, what do we do? Do we lie? Everybody that was in that room kind of knew, I was in the room, what do I do?
What did they call it? Prisoner's dilemma.
Exactly. Yeah, he was doing a little exercise with us there, and what happened was I wrote down the truth, actually. I said, I was in the group, I took a sip of beer, whatever. Well, the end result of that was I got kicked off the baseball team. In fact, everybody that was in that room, except for ironically, the person that picked the lock. Many people say it's because his parents were a key contributor to the school. He didn't get kicked off the team, but he didn't drink any alcohol, and they tried to position it as anyone who touched alcohol got kicked off the team. So it was kind of a big thing in the community. We were in the papers. I think we were even called 8 Men Out or something, was referring back to the White Sox scandal. It was kind of like a wordplay from one of the reporters in the area, in the local paper. And that really soured me on baseball and kind of ended my real thoughts of even wanting to be a pro baseball player, wanting to play baseball in college. It became this big thing. I think we got suspended. We weren't allowed to go to this school dance. It was homecoming or the formal or spring formal or something. And the reason I bring that up as a story that shaped me is it was this distinct moment in my life of where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so I ended up kind of not playing baseball. I didn't play summer league in the summer, which I normally would have after high school ended. And I went down to Santa Barbara, and I instead decided to go into math and computer science. And in truth, probably it was just laziness. I probably was like, that's going to be a lot of work attempting to play baseball. And I had met some people on the baseball team when I went to orientation at Santa Barbara that had said, oh my God, the coach is terrible. It's horrible. We get 5 a.m. workouts like most of the year, all this kind of crazy stuff. And so a number of things just kind of kept me away from that, I think. But what shaped me was the process of going through that experience was I saw like kind of how my dad stood up for me, and I saw how he taught me about, sometimes when it appears you're in the wrong, you've actually done things right. And so he was actually really proud of how I handled not only my honesty in participating, because I knew by stating the truth that something was going to happen to me, but also that I was honest with him in a parent-child relationship in exactly what happened, my participation, and that honesty kind of held all the way through. And it really made him proud of me in that moment. And I think he taught me a lot too about how to back your child. So I heard from other kids' parents on the team later that in an all-parents meeting when the school was trying to sort of lay down punishment, it was actually my dad that got up and fought for all of the kids. And for me. So that was, I think, a really powerful changing moment for me, learning about parent-child and how to deal with adversity. And
so a little quick pause.
Yeah.
You learn about what he did years after or immediately after?
No, maybe weeks later.
Okay,
because
so pretty immediately.
Yeah, pretty immediately. So those meetings happened because they were trying to decide what to do to us. There was a delayed period before they gave us punishment. And in that time frame, there was a number of school administrator and parent meetings where they were discussing this as a group.
Understood.
And so then I heard from one of the other parents that I was close to that my dad, because they were kind of proud of him too, the parent, saying God, your dad really got up and got quite angry at the school actually for the way that they were handling the whole thing. And he was upset because he felt like the school wasn't taking any accountability for having left us alone with no sort of guide or mentor or chaperone or anything. They just left us to our own devices. And he was like, what do you think 17 and 18-year-old kids are going to do in another place, with all of this alone time? So that was his frustration, is he just felt that it was not handled correctly.
Reminds me a lot of that movie with Al Pacino and Chris, I can't remember his name.
I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? He was
the school one where the kids were put up in front of the school and they were grilled. And
that's
he
right.
was
That's
scent of a rose, something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Scent of a Woman.
Yes. Oh yeah, there you go.
That's right.
Scent of a Woman. Great movie. So
very similar.
yes. I think there's a lot of correlation there.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool, transformative moment for me, I think, and sort of learning stuff. How did I deal with it? Even internally, I kind of realized that I ran from that, and that I should probably not run from things like that in the future. I should try to face them. I ran from the poor experience I had in that situation of getting kicked off the team. I allowed it to stop me from pursuing something. I kind of gave up on that. And just because I was annoyed and upset and frustrated. And so that was also a learning thing for me in making a choice that I then looked back on in life. So then later on when I was 25, actually I talked to my parents about how I'd given up on the dream of baseball. And so I actually pursued it again. I joined a semi-pro men's league, and I actually went back to a professional baseball tryout. And I didn't pass, but at least I pushed myself back to that point. So to sort of close the circle, I guess you could say. But anyway, so I learned something kind of about me and in that moment too. It's not always a great thing to run away from things. You kind of can regret it later if you don't stop and think about it. And I did it because I was angry, basically, like, you know, the screw this attitude, you know, forget this stuff. It doesn't matter anyway. I'm just going to ignore it, even though actually it was something I loved and was passionate about. So that both ways I learned a lot kind of about the parent-child relationship and how to be honest in that moment. And also, you know, I learned something about myself and running away from something. So.
Is your father still alive?
No, he passed away earlier this year, actually in
this
April.
Year?
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah, just recently. So. So anyways, it's kind of good to remember that moment with him. So yeah, I guess that's the first transformative, really truly delineating experience between feeling like you know, a teenager versus kind of transitioning to feeling more like a man or becoming a modern man, I guess. That's a moment that sort of sticks out in my mind.
Well, there's a lot of things there. So in many ways, I think what a blessing. Like, you learn so early, because most, I guess, the hero's journey along the way, right? And by hero, I don't mean like glorifying hero, but just, you know, a person's journey.
Yeah.
Typically in the teenage years, you rebel against the authority figures like your parents.
Totally.
But in that moment, you get it so early that you really saw your father as a man. You also saw yourself as a person of integrity.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to drill into is how did you like get so, what's the word I'm looking for, rational about like taking the wisdom, the lessons of, you know, from an unpleasant event happening in life? Because that doesn't come easy. Because most people, when they come across adversity, it's like, woe is me, right? Yeah. I'm the victim of these circumstances. It takes a particular person to try to like get the lessons out of things.
I think the way that I would describe the reasons that I was able to do that is because of the way I was raised. So from a very, very young age, my parents taught me to think about moments in different kinds of ways. What I mean by that is, if I would get in trouble, let's say I got in trouble at school when I remember one time I got in trouble at school in first grade. I swore at a teacher and I got in trouble, and my parents would, and I had actually a number of getting in trouble at school events in my early years. My parents, every time that I ever did anything, they would sit me down and they would not just say, you're in trouble, you're grounded, you're this, you're that. It was, why did you do that? What led you to that decision-making process? What is it about your current state that made you want to do that? Can you articulate that? And then my parents were always talking about, can you understand your weaknesses? Can you articulate your weaknesses? And what can you do to try and work on them? You know, and they to the point that my dad passed away earlier, and my mom would still say this today, is, are you constantly analyzing? Are you constantly working on things to become better in a number of ways, like more emotionally aware or emotionally intelligent, more caring or empathetic, you know, like, and so that really started from a young age. I remember one time I was put into the bathroom, and I was like, they literally said, you know, like, kind of like, I think what like some parents might do, the timeout corner or whatever. They used to use the bathroom, and little did they know, actually, it was kind of fun to play around in the bathroom because there's so many things you can mess around with. But they thought it was like this bad place to be. And so I would be like, okay, you're going to stay in the bathroom until you can come out and tell us, like, why you did what you did. We can have a logical conversation. And, you know, initially you sort of lash out, you know, scream, cry, whatever, pound the door, you know, whatever young kids do. And then they would wait, just let me kind of like burn out in there. And then once they felt I was calm, then they would, okay, let's talk about this. So I think that's how all of that was established. And so from that early point in my life till today, you know, if something goes wrong, or if I have an issue, or I get into a problem or an argument or whatever else, usually later on I have the capacity to go analyze that and think, what led to that? Why am I doing that? How can I maybe be better for the future? Certainly doesn't mean I all of a sudden make perfect decisions coming out of that, but at least the analytical side of that gives me the ability to have some insight and to think from a different perspective, which is really what they were telling me to do. Sometimes they would say things to me like, how do you think we feel about this scenario? What would you do if you were us? What kinds of choices would you make and why? And so there was a lot of this logical, rational working through things. And sometimes, I probably would have nonsensical answers to try to be funny, If I were you, I would give me tons of candy and let me watch as much movies as I want, or something silly, and they would, roll their eyes or something like that. But so I think that's really where it came from, is the questioning and the perspective-oriented stuff.
Now, did they learn that somewhere, or was it just intuitive? That's how they were raised by their parents, or?
I think some of it was how they were raised, and some of it was learned. So they were, excuse me, they were at stages in their life before I was born. It was during the 70s, where they were experimenting with different kinds of idealisms, and they were learning from mentors and guides. Okay. And even were a part of, basically, I guess you could call it a community or a commune.
So they were part of it.
Yeah. So they had
awesome.
so they had some sort of other training that they were getting, and some other teaching that was telling them to think about things in different ways. So I think it's probably a combo of the way they were raised, and then also this experience that they had. In fact, that's how they met each other. It's through that.
Beautiful. So I'm actually curious. So since you were a product of very intentional parenting, right? Yeah. And from the sound of it, I mean, I don't have any kids, but if I have kids, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Did you take the tools they sort of instill in you to raise now you have
two kids.
Two kids, right?
Yeah, 6-year-old and 3-year-old, both boys.
Okay, still really young.
Yep.
Boys, right? So great. So now that you're a parent, do you take the same route?
It's a great question. I think I absolutely do, but the thing that you also realize is that I don't believe there's any singular book, training method, or set of tools that you can apply to every single child you have. They are so different. You have to, in my mind, you have to adapt to them based on the unique styles of personality that they have. So my older one, for example, I do kind of talk to that way. He's very analytical, but he also has this explosion where in the moment of explosion, and maybe he gets this from me, maybe my parents would say I'm like this, he has no capacity to understand logic. It's literally, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm going to lash out, or I'm going to be crying, or I'm going to be angry, or whatever. And then in that moment and some moments afterwards, there's no rational, did you understand what I was saying, or can you see it from this perspective? It's just no. I'm angry at you, I'm upset in this moment. There's nothing that can get, and he's incredibly, incredibly stubborn in that way. And so I just have to wait, and then he hits some line. It's very strange, actually. It's almost like two personalities. He hits some line, and then he's done. And it's like a snap, and he's a different person. Okay, I can talk about this now. And then I will talk to him. So why did you get so angry? And sometimes he can articulate that. Sometimes he can't very well. Sometimes the things that he says that I did or that somebody else did that caused him to get to that moment don't make sense, But for the most part, he's pretty rational and logical when he's calm. And so I can talk through those things, and then I can ask him questions. The younger one, he listens, but he's not old enough yet to the point where I think I could sit him down and be like, do you know why you did what you did? The
right,
3-year-old.
That
he's
consciousness.
not, that capacity is not there yet. But certainly on the older one, I think both Liz and I are very much about, what's your perspective? Why did you do this? What can we do, in the future to help you make better decisions? So I guess some of that may have come from my own experience with my parents, certainly. I definitely have that in me, and so I speak that way. And so I think just with my natural parenting, that probably comes out. I wouldn't say it's intentional. I don't have a plan in my mind that I'm like parenting this way. I literally talk to him the same way I might talk to somebody I work with, which is just try to be logical, try to be empathetic, try to think about it even from I try to think about it from his perspective. Why would he do what he would do? And I try to share that with him. So I try to have these logical conversations to get to some level of understanding. And probably a lot of that came from this. But I don't know that I intentionally think of that. I think it's just natural in me. And I think my wife more has she's much more, how do I say this? She coddles a little bit more. She protects. But she also can get much angrier much faster at him doing something that she doesn't agree with. I guess you call it the Latin blood or whatever. So we have different kind of parenting styles. I'm far more like I'm going to talk calmly and try to, work through it. And she's going to be sort of more get frustrated and upset and then sit him down. But both of us will talk. And I think it's having the conversation. It's not, we completely agree that punishment-based parenting, where it's like you do something wrong, you get punished. It almost reminds me of the current legal system that we live in the US, where it's like, it's fear-based. I call that fear-based parenting. If you do this, this will happen to you. If you speed, you'll get a ticket. If you steal, rather than here are the reasons why those kinds of laws exist, or here's the reasons why you shouldn't do that. Here's why you shouldn't eat a whole, carton of ice cream on your own. Here's why you shouldn't hit your brother, right? Like, how does it feel when he hits you? Why do you do that? Why can't you, But we both have conversations with them and try to create a level of interactivity that builds greater consciousness and awareness and empathy. So, and I think it's just natural. Neither of us have never necessarily read a book or went to a parenting seminar or anything. I think when we had our first child, we ordered 50 books. And some of them we read parts of, and some of them we read, like the things that our friends had told us were worth reading. Certainly we read blogs, articles, things. So it's not like there's no knowledge, but I haven't applied anything that I necessarily read in any of those books into some program. I'm parenting the best way that I know how. I've talked to friends. There's a whole bunch of things where you absorb. You also can witness other people parenting, and you can say, "Oh, I really like that," or "Oh, I really don't like that," and you can pull pieces of those experiences into the things that you do. But I think some of it is just your own interactive relationship with your kids, and it's organic to some extent. But I do think, before the next question, I do think some of that base and foundation that creates the ability to do that without needing a lot of structure comes from the way you were raised. And my wife also, I think, has a really great role models. Her parents, actually, they live with us right now. And they're just wonderful, caring, passionate, protective people, but also they teach lessons. They're very wise. They're very patient. Her dad is a little bit more like she is. Like, they kind of have a hot flame. And her mom and I are very similar. Rick, we kind of more calmly talk through, rationally talk through things. And so the parallels are really interesting. And then having them around also, it helps with parenting as well. They'll see things and then they'll say, off to the side or something, like, you might want to think about this, or you might want to think about that, especially to her, because they only speak Portuguese. But so anyway.
I mean, there's a lot of different directions that can go. Personally, I'm curious about the parenting aspect of it.
Sure.
Because I'm not a parent yet. But if I continue to explore, it'll still be theoretical, right? So I guess I'll do a part 2, part 3.
There you go.
When situations like that happen.
Yeah.
But I wanted to actually ask you, because I wanted to focus on you as an individual, as a man, and how these different events change you as a man. We skip ahead quite a bit from 16 years old to where you are.
Yeah,
this number of years, and a lot of things happen. Yeah. But there's some significant things. So perhaps I'm trying to think. So there's a lot of things happen. So you got married.
Yeah.
And you had a kid or two kids.
Yeah.
Right? A kid first and then second. And then your dad died recently.
Yeah.
I mean, one may say these are significant events that
Sure.
changes, one's outlook in life.
Yeah.
Per se, right? Could you kind of look back on these significant events?
Sure.
And see how it changed you as a man, as a person?
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with getting married because I think that's a really significant event in somebody's life. And for me, I really did not want to get married ever, actually, before I met my wife. I never thought I would. I was kind of like, I felt like, although George Clooney now has gotten married, I guess, once or twice, but there was a period of time where he was known as like the long-running bachelor. And I kind of saw myself that way of like not being tied down to anything, being free. I used to travel a lot, go visit family. My dad's cousin and her husband lived in Europe, and I'd go to France and visit them. Or I actually went to Brazil before I ever met my wife several times because one of my roommates was dating a Brazilian girl. They're now married, so we went to go visit her and her friends in Brazil a couple times. I went down there for a wedding. So I felt like all of the married couples that I saw and knew, they seemed to be in strained relationships that, although they may be extremely loving, were tiring, and they didn't do fun things, and it was all about the kids and the chains. And the truth is, now that I am a parent, I see that they were sharing their frustrations, but they weren't sharing the joys. So all I was hearing from the outside was, oh my God, it's tiring. We're taking kids to the doctor. We got to take them to school. Everything's wrapped around school years. We can only go on vacations at certain times, like all of these constraints. So as a younger man, I was not interested in being constrained. And what happened is I met my wife, and she was the same. She was not interested in being constrained. And so when we started dating, she had a time frame. She was studying English here in LA, actually. She was living in Culver City and studying in Santa Monica. And she was going to go back to Brazil. I guess it was, from the time I met her, it was about 3 months. So we were like, awesome, we've got 3 months to hang out, have a great time. It's totally casual, no pressure. And I think that was the perfect thing that both of us needed to open our minds to the relationship, because there was nothing that we layered on top of it. We just had a ton of fun together. That's all. Like, we would travel. We traveled up and down the coast. We went and visited my brother for his birthday, and we went up in San Francisco. I was living in Santa Barbara at the time. She was down here in LA. And we went to San Diego. We went, anyway, most of it was fairly local. But we partied a lot together. We just had a great sort of couple of months, and we were just hanging out more and more and more. And then we kind of started realizing, like, we don't want this to stop. And we really like spending time together. And what are we going to do about this? And it kept getting better and better and better. And finally, we were talking, and we were like, I think we were driving at the time, because we used to have great conversations when we would drive. And we were talking, and we just said, let's just get married. That way you can stay in the country. And
oh no.
Yeah.
Who said that?
I think I did.
You
actually,
did?
Yeah. Which is, I think she said, well, I have to go back soon. And I think I said, maybe half jokingly, we could just get married and then you don't have to leave. And we kind of looked at each other like, But it wasn't like an immediate, that's just totally ludicrous, out of this world, don't even ever bring that up again. There was more of a, maybe that could work. And the funny thing is, like, that didn't scare me. And it didn't scare her. Instead, we were like, okay, how do we make this work? And the irony of that is that my brother was getting married in a much bigger, he and his wife had actually down here in Orange County, the one that I'm living close to, they had planned a big wedding, and it had been in the works for some time. And we didn't want to rain on anybody's parade, so we didn't tell anybody. So we actually ended up eloping. We had like one witness who was one of my roommates, went to the Santa Barbara courthouse, and we got married. We told nobody for months and months. And we just went with it. It was kind of, and we're both spontaneous people, and we just rolled with it. So anyway, so that was one event that kind of shaped and transformed me, because by transformative, I mean I went from being somebody who wanted no constraints to all of a sudden being in a constraint, right? Like I have to help this person get their green card. I have to go through the process of working on her citizenship. There's tons of documents and processes you have to go through. Yeah. And so you end up, dealing with a lot of constraints, a lot of things that, like the paperwork, the people that you have to meet with, stuff like that. So, and also when you agree to get married, you stop dating other people, of course. That's another constraint, right? So I went from no constraints to changing. And so that was a significant moment. Then fast forward to, I guess it was 4 years later, when we had our first child. And we just got to the point where we were like, we're open to it. It was not planned. We didn't say we're ready to have a child now. We just got to this point where we're like, if that happened, that'd be cool. And so we were living in Texas at the time. And so we had our first child in Texas, and that was extremely transformative because...
So I actually, before we get to the child part, actually, so I'm newly married.
Yeah.
Right. And I love my wife. She's amazing, beautiful, all that. But when you have someone who is a powerful feminine figure, right, who's, all the beautiful things that come with the powerful feminine.
Yeah. And
I'm a powerful masculine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of polarity that happens, right? So I don't want to skip over like some of the integration that needed to happen, right? To find that the synchronicity of the dance between the masculine and the feminine. So how did you, I guess, come closer together? 1 + 1 = 3 kind of a situation, right? Or was it just seamless?
I'll be honest. Yeah. It really has taken until about 2 years ago, I would say, for us to really find synchronicity. Okay. So the first 8 years of our marriage were quite rocky, actually.
Right.
And the reason I'll say that is because she is so strong-minded, and so am I, that for us to align on everything is quite difficult and challenging. And we would find that when we would argue or whatever, some of it was pride, some of it was ego. We both always wanted to be right until a couple of years ago, where we realized that got us nowhere. I think it was the second child and also her parents that really helped us work through that. So to wind back, I put a lot of pressure on her to integrate into this society, to get a job, to help provide financially. And she, first of all, in the beginning, hated that pressure and held that against my family, against myself, and was constantly feeling judged and, felt this like every time she would come hang out with my friends in some cultural setting, she was the first, what are you doing? What's your job? Where are you? And she had been a professor and had her mom as a university professor. She wasn't a professor, she was a teacher of Portuguese and language. And her mom similarly was both I believe a high school teacher and then also a university professor. And so she had a lot of backing in studies and deep studies and knowledge and so to come here and to have that not be an option because she would have had to go through all of this schooling again, and to basically have like, you can be a nanny or you can, do menial jobs that were in some ways in her mind beneath her, not because she judges people, but because she feels like I have access to more given my education and things like that. So that was really hard for her in the beginning because I was trying to push on her to go find something, but the things that she went out looking for were not the things that she was going to be passionate about doing. So she was feeling painted into a corner. And then my family or my friends would put pressure on that. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing to provide? What are you doing to help Josh out? What are you know, like, if you don't have kids, you should be working, right? Like all of these little things that come.
Not from you, but from them.
Even from me too.
Oh, from you.
I'll be honest.
Okay.
I had that of like, I don't want to be the sole financial bearer of our future. I want you to help provide. And I put a lot of pressure on her too. And unfairly so, because what I should have done is actually back off and say, find yourself here in this culture that is totally different, where you don't have an established family or friend circle, and even where the culture is so different to you, you're not used to the way people interact here, right? Like when she would go to a social party in Brazil, it was about, who are you? You know, what interests you? What are you doing out? Not what is your job? Not how much do you make? Not your status. Not who do you know or what do you drive or what can you do for me? Literally, who are you? And that resonates with her significantly. So when she, you know, would and I think some of it was just misjudgment on both sides too. I think sometimes people just want to start conversations and that's how they know how to do it here. They're so used to it. How's your job? What are you up to?
Right.
And so she may have been misinterpreting things that she thought were pressure-based questions that were just casual. And so anyway, that led to a lot of stuff. And that actually why we moved to Texas is because one of my basically my best friend that I played baseball with in high school and was my roommate in college, he offered her a job at a shipping company, and I could work remotely, so that's why we actually ended up moving to Texas. And so she started, this was before we had our first kid. And so then she started working, and she was working super hard, but she hated the job, hated it. It was in like warehousing and doing books and things like that. And she was just like, this is not I'm doing this basically because she's trying to kind of go outside her box and try to support me too. But some of it she's doing out of a sense of pressure and my expectation. And so those are some of the things that we worked through early on. And you get into roles and you get into, if I'm the breadwinner, I should be the decision maker too. And that does not float in her world, right? We are very much equal partners. And of course now she's an entrepreneur. She started her own business, Be Brazil, which is, importing women's athletic apparel from Brazil and selling it here via a number of outlets. And that now she's found her connection and her passion, and she's exploded into it, and probably will take Southern California by storm as well very soon. And so now she has a sense of identity, purpose, her own thing. She doesn't need to rely on me to be sort of the sole breadwinner or the sole point of focus in our family. She has her own independent identity, outside of me. And that's been fantastic for her as well. And so that was also started a couple of years ago. So probably all of these things, having the second child, having her parents live with us, and her starting that company have all really helped our relationship blossom. And so the last 2 years really have been fantastic as we've grown, as I've grown through this. But let me wind back to the first chat when we had our first child.
Thank you.
As another transformative experience. So that was, she was working, I was working remotely, and we kind of had a reversal of, I was kind of in a very comfortable, relaxed environment. I was working from Texas, but for a California company. So they didn't start till 10 o'clock, which meant 12 o'clock noon was basically when I started my job. So I could stay up extremely late at night, sleep in. She had to get up at 5 a.m. to go to her job. So we had this, now she was like working at as crazy hours in this job she didn't like. I was working from home in my slippers, and we kind of had this reversal of what I had been feeling about her before and what she was feeling. So we've gone through these little dynamic changes, but actually at the same time is when we opened our mind to having our first child. And so, she got pregnant and we had our first kid, and that was transformative in the sense of you go from being a couple where everything is about each of your needs working together. We would travel to Brazil for New Year's and to visit her family, and we would go to Las Vegas, or we would go to other parts of the United States. and had sort of that freedom, and going back to that constrained lifestyle, right? And then as soon as we've had our first child, everything changes. And for the husband, it's, I think, in some ways more difficult because not in terms of like having to go through pregnancy and childbirth. That physically, that is far more difficult for a woman for obvious reasons. What I mean is once the child is born, the attention of the mother shifts drastically to the child and away from the relationship. And so you start to feel like caretakers of a child and much less an intimate couple, you know, that's working on your relationship all the time and stuff. You become a mom and a dad. So that's a very transformative moment in a couple's life. And
transformative in a positive way or not so positive?
Both. It's very difficult at first, but it's the most amazing experience you can ever imagine. You become greater than yourself. You become part of something that you see as bigger, which is raising another person in this world, trying to help make them successful, trying to help, and you become connected to that. You are literally changed from the moment your first child is born, and even your second child, whatever, but that first one, you're a different human being. Like you hold this other being for the first time, and it's magical. It's like you can't even describe in eloquent words what it does to you internally. You just have this sense of connection to this other being, this desire to be a better version of yourself instantly, because you're like, I want this person to have the best life. I want them to have a great guide and mentor to follow, a good example. I want them to have financial support and security. I want them to have access to the best things, toys, experiences, schools, everything else. Your desire shifts, you know, like before it might be, I'm not paying that much attention to my financial well-being or whatever. Let's go on this Hawaii trip, you know, like, and spend tons of money on it because we're having fun. To after that, you're like, oh, what about college? And what about being financially aware for the child and setting them up for success and things? So it is very transformative. And it also, it changes sort of the way you perceive the world. You become more of a protector. So you start seeing things that are kind of more negative in some ways, like, oh, before I didn't really notice smog as much, but now that I have this young child that's breathing this all the time, I notice it. Like those kinds of things. You become more aware of people who are angry in spaces and moments that are around you, people that are more negative, like that's impacting my child. You know, before I'm like, I don't, whatever, it's fine, I can deal with that. Now if you have a child and you have a family unit, you become more of like, you kind of want to protect that bubbled family unit more. You start thinking more along those. And then society pushes you on that path too. It's like car seats and minivans and safety ratings and, you know, what kinds of bottles are you buying and what kinds of baby carriers, and you start thinking about, you know, like proper breathable blankets so your child doesn't suffocate, and there's all these things that you go through mentally, and that society helps you along that mental path where you start saying, I'm a protector, right? And you start thinking more in safety terms and stuff like that. So
I have a follow-up question then.
Sure.
First of all, thanks for sharing that, and looking forward to it for myself in the near future.
Yeah.
But how does this desire that you talked about, desire to protect, change your behavior tactically, personally?
Yeah.
From the self-mastery perspective, because you talked about awareness. It's one thing to be aware, it's another to actually change your behavior in some shape or form, right? How you spend your time, how you spend your dollars, how you spend your effort, etc.
I don't know that everybody does this, but I became acutely more aware of things like how fast I was driving, right? Because I don't want to not be there for my child. So putting myself into a more dangerous moment, like, you know, if I'm partying with friends or whatever, like, what am I doing? You know, like before I would say, you know, like getting in a car after having a couple of drinks, I'd be like, I'm fine. It's not a big deal. Whereas once you have a child, you kind of conceptually think about that much more deeply. And it's not to say you shouldn't before, certainly you should, but the mentality shifts and changes. You know, like you start to think about places you're going that may or may not be more or less dangerous. Putting your, you know, I started to do things like yoga, to exercise more, to think about my health and what I was eating more, drinking less, those kinds of things. That bringing a child certainly had that tactical impact on me and the way that I was thinking about all of the things that I was doing on a daily basis. So that was very real. And, you know, like over time, it may become lessened. It's acute right when your child is born. You really start, and then you kind of become a little bit more numb and you sort of fall back to some level of what you were doing before. But for at least for a period of time, you become incredibly aware of all these things, and you try to think about, okay, I'm not going to eat those, you know, a donut or whatever else you might be doing that you recognize as being unhealthy. You try to do that a little bit better. And then just also, you realize that you have to care for a small individual. So you physically have to change sometimes your behavior. You know, like, this may be easier for women than men potentially, but like, you have to carry a small infant around, right? And that may be something you've never done before. In my case, I had, because my mom is a neonatal nurse, and I was also the oldest of 4 kids, so I was 11 and a half years older than my sister. So I was old enough to understand when she was a baby, that she was a baby, and I could carry her and whatever. And so I've had some exposure to small children and things like that before I actually had my first. But some people may not. And so that first moment of carrying a child and carrying, you know, and burping them and moving them around and making sure that they're okay and swaddling them and things like that. Those are physical changes to your behavior that may be very hard for some people.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
New
right?
skills, I have no idea what to do.
Yeah. And you, depending on who you are, you either pick it up, you know, fairly quickly, or maybe it's a challenge. Some things are still a challenge. You know, you have to be mentally aware. For a very simple example is how hot the milk is if you're heating milk up. Like, oftentimes something that dads like to do is to heat up the breast milk to be the one who feeds the baby out of a bottle, right? So that it's not just always on the mother. But you have to remember, you can't make it too hot. Otherwise, you're literally going to burn your child while they're drinking the milk. So you have to pay attention to that, and you have to test it. And so if you don't think about that, and you're in a rush, or you're not paying attention or whatever, you can have a reaction. And even if you do it, the worst thing that happens is the baby starts crying a little bit, and you're like, oh, I did something wrong. But it's little things like that where you have to become more attentive to moments of safety and awareness and care and protection that are the physical things that you actually have to do in terms of changing your behavior. And I wouldn't say that I'm always the most acutely detailed, aware person of every little thing that I'm doing. I'm a more, I'd say, a bigger picture kind of person where sometimes the little minutia of things, I might forget to do that, right? So I guess those are the kind of tactical changes that help transform you a little bit as you go through having a child, and that's one of them.
Cool.
And then the next child, I guess I'll jump to the next child and then my dad. So when you have the second child, you've gone through everything already. So you're far less worried about everything that's happening. If the child gets sick, you don't panic. When you have your first child, you panic. Oh my God, like they're not breathing well, or they're congested, or we have to take them. They have a fever. We've got to go to the doctor immediately, and then you realize like 90% of the time you go to the doctor, they're like, yeah, it's a virus, it's going around. They'll be fine in a couple of days. Just make sure they get fluids. That's basically what you hear most of the time when you go to the doctor. So
Thank you.
Yeah, so when you have your second, then you're like, unless it's a really crazy high fever, you're like, yep, they'll be fine. Unless you start seeing things that are not consistent with what you've already experienced before when your kids get sick. And sometimes there are things that are much worse, maybe an ear infection or something like a pneumonia or something like that, where it's, like you really have to take action quickly or bad things can happen. You learn the differences between those moments, but you become far less sensitive than you are with your first child. First child, everything is this new thing. You know, like you buy way too many things in the beginning because you're like, we need to experiment, we need to test, and there's like a million gajillion products on the market, you know, that people will tell you are the greatest things since sliced bread. Like, you know, what are they? Like all of the different kinds of blankets you can buy, the padding for your cribs, different kinds of cribs, different kinds of car seats and strollers and baby carriers and swaddling blanket and all these different things, bottle warmers, different kinds of bottles, like, and you buy a bunch of that stuff in the beginning because you don't know what to buy and what you really need and what you don't need, and so you go through a lot of that. With the second one, you're like, yeah, we got this. You know, we pretty much know how this whole deal works. So they're not, I wouldn't say the second child is nearly as transformative in a sense. You kind of have practiced before, and so but it still is very different to have two as opposed to one. And you have to be aware that as those children grow, and if you have even more, that dynamics come into play. My wife, for instance, is an only child. I'm the oldest of four. We are very different people as a result of that. I'm used to sharing a lot more. I'm used to communicating and planning and doing things in a much crazier way. She's far more used to like direct attention, and all the planning with her family is around her and her needs, and when she'll be arriving, when she'll be home, whatever. When you've got 4 or 6, you know, 2 parents and 4 kids, it's chaos, you know, and you have to be okay with it. Plans are changing, somebody's arriving later, somebody's arriving earlier, maybe somebody came a day earlier and you didn't know. Those things can agitate her, whereas it's nothing to me. Who cares? What's the big deal, right? And so the reason I bring that up is to say when you have more than one, you have to be aware of the dynamics between multiple children. Like if you only give attention to one and not the other is going to be totally aware of that, no matter how young they are, right? And the other thing is when the second one comes along, the first one is no longer the only source of your attention or the only focal point of your attention. Now they have to share it, and that's really hard for the older one, right? Like immediately there's this, wait, why is this thing so important? Why are they taking attention away? Why are you focusing so much? Why do they get stuff? And then as they get older, it's like, why did he get that and I didn't get this? You know, like, and so you have to start buying everything. Almost every time you go get a present or whatever, you have to get 2. And this is a very Brazilian thing to do, but even if it's one's birthday, my wife will always buy a present for the other.
No kidding.
Always.
Wow.
So that when the presents and everything happens, it's like, yes, it's your birthday. Yeah, here, happy birthday. Here's your cake. Here's your everything. And also, happy other person's birthday. You know, like here's this present for you, so you don't feel left out. And actually, that's one of the things that I never experienced growing up, which I think is a really cool cultural tradition that they have.
How about no one gets birthday gifts?
Or no, that's fine too. That's great. If you just get love, that's fine. That would work as well, you know. But I think the point really is that you try to show that love, care, and affection all the time to both. Like, I'm thinking about you, I'm caring about you, you're not left out, you're not. And even though she's an only child, she's really good at that. She's really good at making sure they're both kind of taken care of. But so that transforms you a little when you have the second one, because now you're like this larger nuclear family, and you have to start thinking about, double everything. It's more financial burden, right? Like you've got to buy more food. You've got to buy, if you buy plane tickets, you've got to get 2 extra ones. You know, all of those things come into play. So there's a lot of dynamic inside of that. And then last thing is, 15 minutes, is my dad passing. As far as being a transformative event, extremely transformative in the sense that it's acute awareness to mortality, to appreciating the moments of life a little bit more, because you recognize how fleeting it is. And especially when you see somebody who goes from being kind of a rock and a very strong person to dealing with health issues and becoming weaker and weaker, and then, you know, having to caretake them. Or my mom really became a caretaker for the last 1.5 years because my dad was dealing with chemo and dealing with all these things. And you see, you know, my dad actually over the course of several years kind of became a different person to me, really, in the sense that he lost a lot of his memory, and he was much harder to carry conversations. It was much, he would become frustrated when he couldn't remember things, so he was more irritable. So a lot of changes happened also as a result of my dad's health problems. And so in witnessing that and going through, and then, of course, dealing with his passing, and it becomes this event where you're like, okay, I'm a father now. I see how that is. It made me even want to be healthier, actually, and care more about my health. And it makes, to be there for my children for as long as I can, and to have a really great relationship with them. And also it helped me focus a little bit on, what is important and what is not in terms of relationship with parent-child. And then also just the bare fact of, death. What is death? How close are we all to it? And how do we think and feel about it? And having conversations with people about it. How do I talk to my mom about what's happened? Like my mom kind of went immediately into, which I would totally expect for somebody that has been married for more than 50 years, immediately went into this, like, there's this chasm in her life now, right? So there's a lot of nostalgia, remembering things, thinking about events, wishing she had done certain things, like talking about that in a certain number of ways. And that kind of helps me go, you know what? It's really important to really think about the way you want to shape your life and your moments. Because if you think about it from the lens of what life will be like later, you could say all the way to your deathbed if you want. In looking back in reverse, it's a valuable thing to say, how would I like my life to be shaped from this day to some potential date, hopefully in the far future. And I think somebody interviewed Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and they were saying, how do you explain your amazing decision making to turn Amazon into this one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable in terms of market cap, I think they might be the most right now, company in the world. And he was like, a lot of people are making decisions based on, a quarter or close revenue or a specific customer or whatever. And he's like, I always do this. I ask myself, at 85, how would you like to look back on all of these decisions? And what would you do in this moment, thinking from that lens? And he's like, so I'm always thinking about, if I'm challenging myself as an older person about my decisions in the present, I have that lens of seeing how the future changed and shaped things. So he's like, I'm always thinking about stuff that way. How would I have behaved in looking backwards? And he said that helps him make decisions that are not grounded in immediacy, immediate need, but bigger picture, right? So along the same lines, I think that's kind of how I feel that my dad's passing has transformed me. It's a bigger picture. It's, how do I make my current life better? How do I make better decisions? How do I have better relationships, both with my wife, my family, my kids, as a brother, as a son, as a spouse? And of course, you're not going to be perfect, because it's impossible to be perfect, but you can certainly strive for it. And I guess the way that I would picture this from my own lens in the future is, what does success look like for me? And success for me looks like, I did an amazing job raising my kids, set them up for amazing success, gave them the choices. I don't actually care about success for them, other than that they are happy, feel supported, have the capacity to make their own choices and lead lives, but that I've given them enough to have the opportunities to do so in a really great way.
Discretionary options.
There you go. Yeah. And then same thing, how have I supported my wife, grown as a modern man, grown as a person in, how I see gender relationships and roles, and how have I helped set us up for success, so that she looks back and goes, we did everything we could together too. And that's kind of my dad's passing really, it opened my eyes to a lot of things in thinking about my own behaviors and thinking about my relationships with both family and friends, and also the biggest one I think is probably parent-child, because I became kind of over the last 10 years pretty distant from my dad. I didn't really, and you might say, well, that coincides with how long you've been married, and the truth is, when you get married, your life changes, and when you have kids, your life changes. The nucleus of your family, it's no longer you and your parents. It's now that person and your children. And then it grows out from there. Of course, you still have family and relationships and stuff, but the nucleus changes. Before you ever get married, it's me and my siblings and my parents. That's the nucleus. And then once you change, it changes. So I think I drifted away from him, and also I think his health issues contributed to that. So I wasn't having as deep of conversations. We would both be probably getting kind of frustrated actually talking to each other, or it would be very fast. Like, how's it going? Good. Everything's great. Yeah, we're doing, kids good, blah, 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 so he became distant to me, and I probably in his mind became distant to him. And so I think in his passing, that's something I became aware of and talked to my mom about too. In looking back and saying, what could I have done differently there, maybe to make that better? And of course, I don't have the opportunity to fix that, but I do have the opportunity with my children to set us up maybe for greater success, that kind of thing. So I guess that's about that.
I know you only have limited number of time, so how many minutes?
9.
9 minutes, perfect. So let's do some rapid questions.
Sure.
Tactically speaking, right? Because my intention of this podcast is that people not only learn from your narrative, right, the journey that you've taken, the wisdom that you share, kind of drop the gems that you drop along the way, but also tactically. What disciplines do you use to govern your day-to-day such that you're as grounded as you can be?
I'll try to be quick with my answers.
Yeah.
Empathy is one of the hugest disciplines that anybody could ever learn, which is empathy and perspective, which is when faced with any situation, thinking about the person that you're talking to or the people you're dealing with through their lens. If you can think and understand them, you can help make decisions that are better for the collective group, the two of you, whatever else, because you're not enforcing your own specific bias on them. You're attempting to think what's better for either all of you or the group or whatever. So it's empathy to other people and perspective, trying to think through the perspective of other people in decision making. That's one. Another tactical thing would be listen to your inner voice. So there's a lot of moments that you'll experience in the work world where you'll have a little a hesitation, a fear, a worry. You'll notice and recognize things that feel out of place to you. They feel wrong. It could be somebody's behavior, a communication style, an email thread, an interaction, something you notice technologically, whatever. Don't let that voice get lost. Note it, write it down, keep track of it, talk to people about it, bring it up in one-on-ones, bring it up in group sessions or with management or whoever else. Don't let those, because what those little voice moments are typically telling you, it's like the sensors on a car. It's telling you, there's a little bit less air in the tire. You should probably brake now because I'm sensing that something is wrong, right? Like, if you don't pay attention to that sensory data, you will run into deeper issues later because you're not taking quick corrective action, right? Like that car tire is low and you pull into a gas station, fill it up quickly, you're probably not going to have a problem. But if you let that thing go over time, you're going to change the tread, you're going to change, the wear on the tire. It's going to wear out faster. You may lead to an accident, whatever else it is. So that's another tactical thing, is note those things down. Actually keep track of them. Write them in Evernote or Bear or whatever notes, some pads. So that's another tactical thing. Another thing is have lots of one-on-ones, no matter who you are. One-on-one conversations lead to all kinds of awareness, understanding, relationship building, confidence, trust, feedback loops, and you really can't get those in any sort of group or hallway or email thread or anything else. It's really about building human relationships. So those are some of the 3 tactical things that I would recommend to everybody is, think outside of yourself, note the little sensory thing that goes wrong, keep track of it and try to take action against it, and have lots of one-on-ones if you can, really build relationships with people.
Second tactical thing I want people to walk away from is, what kind of criteria do you use to select the men in your inner circle?
I'm
man or woman? Actually,
yeah. It's interesting. I think I don't know that I could boil it down to like a framework, right?
I asked this question because I struggle with it.
Yeah.
I don't actually know this specifically, so I was hoping maybe you can help me distill what some of these criteria may be.
I think what I would say is I typically look for people who are emotionally intelligent, people who have the capacity to help and care and change people's lives in a way that is intellectually advanced, I would say.
What does that mean?
I have a hard time trusting people that I don't feel are that aware of things that are happening in the universe. So if people are not curious about deeper conversations, deeper topics, talking about spirituality, talking about politics, talking about history, talking about technology, with a more open-minded approach and perspective to many things could be right, I tend to lean towards people who have very open-minded takes on the world, as opposed to I am very hardline about subjects, but are also aware of things in the world. So that's what I mean by somewhat intellectually advanced. I don't mean that they're necessarily smarter than other people. I mean that they're curious, and their curiosity leads them to deeper places. So they typically tend to read more. They typically tend to discuss deeper levels of topics around emotion, around life and death, around spirituality, around religion, around why people do what people do over the course of history, as opposed to just surface level things. Not that I love surface level stuff too, comforts and movies and technology and things like that. But in terms of my inner circle, it's people that have the capacity to go far deeper and are open-minded in the way that they typically approach topics. And I think also some of the inner circle are people who have great senses of humor. I love, although I don't show it that much in the workplace, but I love people who have great senses of humor and can throw humor on certain situations and can turn negative things into humorous events, and they don't tend to take things too seriously. I probably take things more seriously than most of the people do in the inner circle. Although my best friend is he's really funny, but he's also extremely serious. And so some of it might also be having similar characteristics to me, which is maybe an ego-driven friend circle. But those are the things. It's a really hard thing to state why you choose people. I don't know that you always do.
Oh,
I think sometimes maybe people choose you too, subconsciously. So it's not necessarily, now you have the capacity to move on from people, certainly, but sometimes it's randomness that can connect. Maybe it's not that random, I don't know. But sometimes you get connected to certain people and there is some sort of a bond, like a magnetism that aligns you, and it may be across a whole number of things. Maybe it's one thing that I certainly bond with people over sports, and I have certain friends that I've been fans of certain teams with for many, many years, and we always talk about that. So that's one way that it has been a bond. But it doesn't stop there. You dive deeper into other things as a result of the friendship, but it only started because of our interest in sports. That's how we even started talking. So so there may be some of that too, like a little bit of a shared interest, sports or family or travel or things that might be interesting. So I guess that's as much as I could describe why.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Josh. And then in the last minute, I really want to acknowledge you for just opening yourself up like this in a public forum. And sharing your life stories, sharing what's intimate about your own journey. and really share what's some of the perhaps most recent difficult moment, your father's passing and so forth,
Yeah.
in a way that's so generous. I really acknowledge you for doing that. It's not an ordinary conversation, so
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing yourself so generously.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
It was actually really interesting to kind of think about it in this kind of way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much.